Have you ever had one of those moments when you thought, well, I can just make it myself. I have a layer cake laying around. I don't have any time to go shopping. I've got a big trip to New York and I really need a new bag. And that is how I came up with the Jeanette. So this bag is fully rooted in rag quilting. It is completely reversible and it's named after my mom. So her middle name was Jeanette. So I thought it would be fun to make this nice cozy fall bag. And it's one of my first designs in bag making. So I thought I'd honor my mom and just give it her middle name. As you can see, here is the patchwork side, or you can flip it back out to the cozy rag quilt side, which is probably my favorite. It is such a fun bag to make, and I'm going to show you how to make it in this video. We're going to learn a few things. Let me get it all straightened out here, and I can't wait to take it to New York. But, so here, let's take another look at it. So what are we going to learn today? So we're going to learn basic bag techniques using a layer cake, because you know I love my pre-cuts. We're going to learn how to make it completely reversible. We're going to learn how to put pockets on the inside. And then we're going to talk about how to compose your bag so that it really reflects your personality. So I love the layer cakes because all the designs here are coordinated. So see if you can see on the back, they have, and this is actually the pattern that I made the concept bag with. Here's the concept bag. The layer cake that I'm going to use for this example is called Hello Pumpkin. I've already separated my colors, but I will let you see what it looks like, and it is absolutely adorable. So we covered what we're going to learn today as we make the Jeanette bag, but let's also talk about the equipment and the supplies that you need. And I've included a supply list in the description, so go grab that. It has everything you need. It has all the tools. It has the amount of material we'll need and how to divide it up. And that's a really good resource. So go print it out, gather all that stuff up, and then after I get through this, we will go right into the sewing. Well, actually, we'll go right into looking at the composition of the bag because I really want to talk to you about that. So you're going to need your sewing machine. You're going to need thread, and I chose 100% cotton this time just to switch it up a little bit. Your full bobbin, and I really recommend that walking foot. For the bag, we'll use a little bit of medium weight interfacing or structure, and so it does get a little thick, but you know, you put that walking foot on there, it's going to go just beautiful. And then a few things that I use that's different in this project than some of my other ones. So I did use some clips. Let's see if I can show them to you. I did use some clips. They'll come in really handy when we start putting the lining inside the bag. And I used some pins. The other tools that you're going to need an iron and a place to press, because you'll see as I show you how I constructed the bag, we will actually fold our layer cakes in half. So you need a good place to press and a good place to iron. You can cut these with your scissors. However, I'm going to cut them with my rotary blade and a straight edge. So if you have that in a mat, then you can follow along there. If not, just when we open up those seams, you're just going to cut right down those seams. And again, I'll go through all of this step by step. And let's see, was there anything else that I used? Oh, yeah. I will show you where to get this on Amazon too, or if you have your own, you know, with this. But it's the fusible and it's mid-weight. Interfacing. I just wanted my bag to have a little bit more structure. It's actually going to be a laptop bag, so I needed it to be a little bit heavier than, say, you probably can't see it, but it's right back there in the corner, the jelly roll bag that is just quilted. So I just needed it to be a little bit heavier weight. You need 33 squares, 10 by 10 of your layer cake, and you're going to need some flannel. So you'll need about 12 squares of flannel, and of course your medium interfacing. So now let's take a look at how that all divides out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the bag, and I'm going to talk about the composition, so that way you can start gathering ideas on how you want to design your bag. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the composition of the bag. And the first thing you're going to say right away is, well, Leslie, you said we were going to use layer cakes, which are 10 by 10 squares, and those are definitely not squares. They're more rectangles, and you're exactly correct. So for this bag, each of the squares of the layer cakes will be folded over and cut down the middle. I wanted it to be a little bit different looking than just the, you know, the regular 9 patch or all that. So I decided I was going to use rectangles. So you're going to need, for your side A, which is your rag quilt side, you will need 12 coordinated squares of from your layer cake. And for this example, I chose to do a dark, a light, a dark, a light, a dark, and a light. And again, a layer cake, they're all coordinated, so you just have to pick what you would like. So my front side and my back side are a little bit different. So again, you can design it however you want to. If you want it all to match, if you want one side to be, different, if you want to match up the sides. So like for example, I do not expose the seams on the edges. So this one had the same pattern on both, so it looks like it continues around. This one didn't. It's all up to you. For this project, we will use 3/4 inch seams. On the concept bag, I used 1 inch, and they were just a bit too fluffy. And so when I went to do the project bag, I pulled it down to 3/4 inch seams, and they're so much better. And for the concept bag, I used all the same color flannel behind the squares. For this one, I color coordinated. So like this one has a green behind it. This cream color one has a cream behind it. But again, this is what is so fun about this bag. You could make a gazillion different versions of this bag just because of all the different color combinations. And then you'll see we'll rag the front part of it all the way down to the bottom seams. Your handles or your straps, I've always called them handles, just like I call it a pocketbook. But the straps are also made with the layer cakes. You will use 5 layer cakes in order to make the handle. And I'm going to show you how to make handles. And so I used to hate making them. I hated making straps or handles. But, and I can't remember where exactly I saw this technique, but it's now my go-to technique. And I now don't really hate them so much. So that covers the rag quilt side of the Jeanette. I just love it, and it's so fluffy. So let me show you the inside, and we'll talk about the inside, which is done in patchwork, but the patchwork is done with the layer cake squares. So let me flip it out and we'll talk about that. So remember, one of the items I said we would cover is how to make pockets. Well, with the rag quilt and making it reversible, it's one of the easier ways to learn how to do pockets and how to set your lining inside a bag. So for the pockets, we're going to use 2 squares so that they'll be double lined, and we're going to rag those edges as well. And that's what makes the bag reversible, is because we're going to rag the top, and so you don't have to flip it inside out, and you're also going to rag the pockets so that way you don't have to flip those. Because if you've ever made a tote bag, you have to flip it out inside out, and you have to poke out the seams and all of that. But with this bag, you don't have to do that because we're going to rag those top seams. We're going to put it together. It is probably one of the easier totes. So it's very beginner friendly, because again, you don't have to worry about flipping your lining inside out, your pockets inside out, anything like that. And it goes together fairly quickly. The hardest part that you're going to find, I think, is actually picking out your material. I could spend an hour trying to pick out my pattern. So what I've done is I have already pre-selected my patterns and what I want on the front, what I want on the back. So we've looked at the composition of the bag, and we've talked about how it's structured and what the front looks like and the back looks like. So now I'm going to walk you through what I picked out for the bag for us to do the tutorial. So I will show you the 12 layer cakes, the 100% cotton that I picked out for the front, and I will show you the coordinating flannel that goes with them. I will also show you what I picked out for the side B, which is our patchwork side in the pockets. And then lastly, I'll show you what I picked for the straps. And then what we'll do is we will prep our front side. And prepping really consists of the ironing and cutting, but we'll go through that step by step. Then we're going to put it together in a very similar manner that we did for the rag quilt. And if you've not had a chance to go see that video, you can find it, I think, right here maybe, but go take a look at it. It has all of the basics for rag quilting using a teacher quilt, but we'll go through all the steps over again. So if you've not watched it, don't worry. So we'll assemble the front side and the back side, and then we will work on our lining and we'll put our pockets in. And then one of the really cool things we're going to do is box corners. So that's always a fun thing to learn. And then we will set the lining inside the bag and sew our straps. And what else will we do? Oh, that's really it. I mean, it's a really simple process. So with that, we're going to go talk about putting together our fronts with our flannel and getting all of those squares prepped so we can get to sewing. So, and I know you're excited. It's like, it's about time. Let's get to sewing. So first we got to press a little bit. We got to cut a little bit, and we're going to do the same type of fabric sandwiches. We're going to chain stitch. We're going to do all the techniques that help us speed up the construction of this bag. And then within a couple hours, you're going to have a tote that you can carry, and everybody's going to want to know where you bought that. And you can proudly say, I made it myself. Okay, so I have sorted through my layer cakes, and I have picked out the 12 squares that I'm going to use for the outside of my bag. So for the rag quilt part of the bag. So this will be my top layer, and this will be my bottom layer. And you can see, so I get an idea of how my bag is going to look. I'll fold them in half, and I'll just lay them across in the squares. Then I'll go ahead and I'll lay out what I need for the inside, the side B. So this stack is for one side of that, and you can see I've picked out the colors. That one side will be all green. This will be for side 2. And then I lay out my pockets so that I will have that in a stack by itself, and then I will have my strap. So I find that it's really important for me to go ahead and design the bag in my head, lay all of the material out and label them so that when I get ready for that step that we're just ready to go. 10-inch squares, we are going to press them in half, making sure my corners match. And again, I just want to get a really nice pressed seam. And then I'm going to put it back in order where it was, because again, this is how I want my bag to look. So I want to really make sure that I keep it in order. So I'm going to go ahead and press all of these. The next step will be to then, once we press them, will be to cut them so that we have the 5 by 10 rectangles that gives our Jeanette bag its signature look. So we're here at my cutting table. So you can also see that I have labeled all of my panels. So this is the bottom, number 3, and then I have bottom number 2. So what I'm going to do from the cutting table, and I've already cut bottom number 1. I'm just gonna leave it over here. So what I do to cut these is that I'm going to turn it facing me, the folded seam facing my right side. And I'm gonna take my straight edge, and I'm going to put it as close to that folded seam as possible. And then I'm going to take my rotary cutter, but I'm going to cut it on an angle. I'm not going to cut it straight up and down. I'm going to cut it on an angle. So I'm just taking off the slightest little sliver of this panel. So then you say, well, what if I don't have a rotary cutter or a mat, and I really don't want to go invest in it right now? No worries, just open that up and cut right on that fold line. And again, this is going to be rag, so your edges, won't fray them. But get it as straight as possible, but because you have that really nice fold line, you can just cut right up the center with your fabric scissors. And then we can just go on to the next step. So whether you're using your rotary cutter or your scissors, the goal of this step is to take our 10 by 10 squares that we had ironed or pressed in half, and to get them into being 5 by 10 rectangles, keeping them in the order that you want your bag to be designed to. So once you're done with all your cutting, here's what you should have. You should have a pile for your top. You should have a pile for your bottom, and this is for both sides. And then you should have all of your flannel. All right, let's talk about how to lay out these fabric sandwiches so that we can easily pick them up and take them to the machine and chain stitch them. So I like to put my flannel on the bottom. So we're going to lay this one right side down, because again, you want the wrong sides touching in your fabric sandwiches. And then I'm just going to lay that one on top of it. So for the rectangles, I found that it was easier for me to do a vertical one and a horizontal one. So I will just go through here, and again, I will just put my flannel side down, and I will come with my cotton. And this is going to make it easy when we get to the machine, so we can just run our seam, go down the middle of the rectangle. So at this point in the project, you have 24 fabric sandwiches, one side cotton, one side flannel, and you've put them on top of each other in an alternating fashion so that you have something that resembles a big X. We're now going to take it to the machine and do our seam down the middle. From there, we'll build the front panel, and we'll build the back panel of the outside, and then we'll move on to the lining. So we have our fabric sandwiches here, and I'm going to place them on my table so I can just grab from the pile. And I'm going to put my first fabric sandwich on my machine under my presser foot. And I've got it in the middle, so I'm going to use that first one as my guide to all the rest of them. And you'll see as you watch me follow this, I'm going to sew down the center, and then I'm going to pull the next one right up and under it so it lines up that seam. So that way you can keep them straight. So here we go. And again, I'm using 100% cotton thread for this bag. All right, so you see as I'm coming down to the end here, so I'm going to stop it and put my needle down. And then I'm going to take my next one that is in line, just make sure none of my edges have shifted. And then I'm going to put it right up next to that one. So you see it is in line. I'm going to move this B1 off here. So it is straight in line so that when you go to do your chain stitching, it is exactly in the same place where you sewed the first one. And I know you guys see that empty bobbin, don't you? Because I didn't do what I said to do, right? I didn't make sure my bobbin was. We'll change it after we do the, we'll do it after we do the chain stitch here. So I'm just going to continue to quilt my rectangles. And then when I'm done, we'll come back here and we will do the whole chain stitch route. So all your rectangles should be sewn together in one big long chain. So now let's snip those apart and get them organized back into how they go in the back. And I'll show you how I lay them out on my table so that I can just pick one up and then sew our rows together for our bag. So for this one, you're going to put your flannel sides together and match their seams or match their edges up. And for this one, I'm going to use a 3/4 inch seam. So I've got my painter's tape here. This will help me keep my line. Run my seam. And then I just pay careful attention to how I've laid out my rectangles so that I will pick the next rectangle up and putting it in the right order. Again, making sure that I'm paying attention to my directional prints. And then I'm just going to continue to sew across my rows, making sure my flannel is down. So that is really what you do. So you do this for both of the rows, and we're going to do that, and then we're going to join those two rows together. Here's the first row of the bag, and here is the second row of the bag. Now we're going to sew them together to get one panel of our Jeanette bag. So it is flannel side up here and then flannel side down. So flannel sides are together. So open up the seams on both sides of your panel, of both sides of your row. Open up your seams. And then you make sure that they match. And then just straighten this out here. Again, if this part doesn't match, you can always trim that. But if you don't get your seams right, then you can't, I mean, you can fix it by taking it out and redoing it, but just start off there. And then again, we're going to use our 3/4 inch seam. I'll put it in there, I'm going to put my needle down. So 3/4 inch seams, we flattened out our seams. The flannel should be showing up. And as we get to here, we're going to backstitch. And again, just make sure if you're using a walking foot, just check your manual. Again, I do it all the time. So I'm going to just backstitch at my edge. I'm going to continue to run my seam. Again, making sure that all the seams stay flat. And as I approach the seam, I will backstitch where it connects. And so far so good. My seams have stayed very, very much in line with each other. And again, we'll trim these off so if they're not completely even. Okay, let's do a project check. Where you should be right now is you should have the outside of your bag done. That means you have 2 panels. Each panel has 12 rectangles and they're sewn in rag quilt style. And so my panels look like this. That's panel A, and I did both of my panels the same, so they will look exactly alike. But that's where you're at right now, is we have the outside of the bag done. The next thing that we'll do is we'll work on the lining. So before we start on the step-by-step of the lining, I want to show you what one side of the lining is going to look like so we have a frame of reference. So again, this is the patchwork side of the bag, and we're using the 10 by 10 to create a 6 patchwork, and then in the middle we will sew our pocket. So again, I wanted you to see it first before we go in and start the construction. So this side is done, and now I will take you down to the table, and then we'll go to the machine and stitch the other side of our lining. All right, so I start out by laying the squares for my lining out on my table so that I know what my design is going to look like. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to the machine, and I'm going to sew them right sides together, and I'm going to sew a 3/4 of an inch seam down this side. Then I'm going to open it back up, and I'm going to sew a 3/4 inch seam down this side, so that I will have a row of 3 sewn together. Then I'm going to do the same thing with this row, as I'm going to flip this on top of this right side together, 3/4 inch seam down that side. I will turn this onto this side, and I will do the same 3/4 inch there. So, and I'm going to do my 3/4 inch seam. And now I'm going to sew the other side of the panel, or the other side of the square. So again, I'm going to work a row of 3 big squares, so 10-inch squares, and then I will work the second. And then I'm going to go press my seams open before I sew the 2 rows together to make the one side of our lining. All right, so here's my row 1 with the 3 big squares in it, and row number 2, and I've pressed out my seams flat. So now I'm going to take it to the machine, and I'm going to put my right sides together to sew my entire panel. And so now I'm sewing both of my rows together with a 3/4 inch seam. And this will create our lining panel. And so again, this is one side of the side B. And when I showed you the other side, it already has the pocket on it. Let me turn it around so you guys can see it. So this is what we're going to do next. We're just going to put the 2 pieces of material together, sew across the top, put it on our side B, and then sew around here, leaving this top open. All right, so I have the pocket here. And again, I have the ugly sides together, or the wrong sides together. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch across that top with my 3/4 inch seam. And again, this is going to be the open side of the pocket. I may do every pocket like this from now on, so I don't have to turn them inside out. So again, you just stitch across, and then we're going to go back to the panel for side B, and we're going to set the pocket. I've sewn the stitches across the top of our pocket. So let's see what we've got here. It's about 4 inches. So for those of you who like exact measurements, I went about 4 inches down from the top, and then I'm going to position my pocket to where my guess is it's about a 3/4 inch. It is about a 3/4 inch seam on either side. I love it when things like that work out. All right, so let me pin it, and then again, we're gonna start here, and we're going to sew all the way down to about a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch here. We're going to stop and back stitch, pivot, come across, stop, put our needle down, pivot, and go all the way up. So we're just sewing around the... Okay, so we've got our pocket down here on the machine. And again, you'll see this seam. This is where we're going to sew, because it's going to give us a great line. And it just so happens to be 3/4 of an inch. So I always start my pockets off with a back stitch. And then I'm just going to run the seam. I'm just going to stitch all the way down. And then when I get close enough to the edge, see, right about there, I'm going to put my needle down. I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to let it come back to where it was and put my needle down, and I'm going to pivot my whole entire side of our panel. And then I'm going to stitch a little bit, back stitch, and then I'm going to continue on with my stitching. And so again, we're going to rag these edges, and it does really look cool. Now as I'm approaching here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stop and back stitch. I'm going to get to where I want my needle to go down, and I'm going to rotate or pivot my entire panel, and then I'm going to just sew straight up. And that is how we put the pocket on our patchwork panel of our Jeanette bag. And when I get to the edge here, I will back stitch up as well. I have a lot of strings. All right, so that gets our pocket on our panel. So we finished the rag quilt side of the Jeanette bag, and we finished the patchwork side of the Jeanette bag. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put the interfacing or the structure on the rag quilt side. So here's my iron-on structure or my fusible interfacing, and you can tell which side is the iron. If you rub your hand over it, it feels like little bumpies on it. So what I do is I will just take one of my panels and I will lay it on here, and I will just cut around it with my scissors. So I'm going to do that right now, and I'll start it in the corner. And if it's not completely even, that's okay too. We're going to trim all this up anyways. So just trim it up with your scissors for both sides of the rag quilt panels. And so this is the one that I got off Amazon. So I love it because I just rotated it. You saw how I rotated it, and I can put the other side of the panel right here, and it fits perfectly. Again, so I don't have to measure it. And then I'm just going to cut along those as well. You will need some of this for the strap, but we will work on the straps once we get all of the panels put together. Okay, so go ahead and fold that up and just put it off to the side until we're ready to work on our straps. Then the next thing that you want to do is you want to take it over to your iron, and you want to press just to use a piece of parchment paper, and then you can iron it from the interfacing side down, which gets much more heat to that glue than trying to do it from the top. All right, let me finish pressing. All right, so you'll see I've got the interfacing on both sides of my rag quilt side of my bag. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim my patchwork side, and I'm going to lay my patchwork side right face down, because in reality, that is where, when you put the bag together, the right side's going to be facing up. So I'm going to have the right side down, and I'm going to have one of my rag quilt pieces the right side up. So again, it's how the bag will exist once we get it, once we've sewn it. And I'm just going to lay it there, and I'm going to make sure that it is on there. And then I'm just going to trim it up. And then I'm just going to take my scissors, and I'm just going to cut down the side as even as I can with the rag quilt panel. And if you have some interfacing that's left laying over like that, you can just trim that off too. But again, both the lining, or both the patchwork side of your bag and your rag quilt side of the bag, they're going to have the same seam allowance. So you can trim them up to be even. So let's do that side. And then let's do this side. Okay, so we're going to trim the other side, and then that will get us one step closer. From here, what I will do is I will go make my straps, because when I was constructing them before, I would go ahead and put the bag together and I'd get all excited. But since it didn't have the straps, I had to stop and go do the straps. So we're going to make sure we have all of our panels together. And then you can get an idea how your bag is going to look, right? Here's your rag quilt side and here's your patchwork side. So then what I'll do is I'm just going to fold this over and lay it aside, and I'm going to trim the other one. And then we're going to come back here and we're going to talk about the straps. Oh, I thought of something as I was laying the green layer out here. Make sure that your pocket is the right side up. So for example, this is my patchwork side and here's my pocket. So whenever I go to lay my rag quilt side on top of it, I want it to be in the same direction. So again, this is the bottom of your bag, so that when you flip it over, your pocket should be here. Don't do the mistake I did, and my pocket was at the bottom. So if you have to tape something to it, put a pin, or that more than one time I have sewn a bag and the pocket opening has been at the bottom and I've had to take it out. All right, so before we dive into the straps, let's just recap the straps. You need 5 layer cakes, so 5 10 by 10s. And we're going to make a really long row of those 5 by 10. So it's going to end up being, what, 10 by 50, right? 5 times, yeah, it's going to be 10 by 50. But you can see here in this example of the green bag how they're going to come out. So you'll have a layer cake here, a layer cake here, all the way across the top. So again, I know we've done a lot of construction on the front of the bag and the lining, but now that we're going to work on the straps, I just wanted to remind you what they look like before we actually start into the construction. And let's see, it's been a while, so let me see what they look like. Oh, okay, so this one is going to be the center of my strap, and then I'm going to put this print on either side. Let me make sure they're in the right direction. And then I will put the plaid on the very end. So I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to sew them together so that I have one long row of the layer cakes. And again, it'll be 10 by 50. And you just need to run a nice even seam. I'm probably still going to do 3/4. I might pull it down to a 1/2 inch. All one big long piece of material. Okay, so here I am constructing the strap, and I just chose to do my seam allowance the width of the presser foot here. So just going to sew this one together, and then I will sew the remaining 3. And again, we're going after a piece of material that is 10 inches by 50. All right, so let me sew that together and I'll meet you back at the cutting table. All right, we have the base for our straps, and I press the seams flat except for this one, and I got a little too close, so I had to double seam it. So I just did a seam and I'm going to press it to one side. So then you take that strip of material and fold it in half long ways, press on this seam and cut that in half, and then you'll have 2 pieces of material that are 5 by 50 inches long. I've pressed it and I have the really nice seam. So now I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to cut it the same way that I did when way back in the beginning when we were working on our squares. I'm going to take my straight edge as close to the edge as possible, and I'm going to trim that up. You can cut it with your scissors. That's not a problem, but I'm going to use my rotary cutter, and I'm going to trim all the way down on that ironed seam as close to the edge as I can get it to create the 2 pieces for my straps. All right, so now you have 2 perfectly sized pieces for your straps. So the next thing we do before we actually construct them is we're going to go ahead and get our interfacing ready as well. And take what you had left over. So I'm going to fold this up a couple different times. I'm going to cut 1-inch strips of the interfacing, and I'm going to cut 3 because I know that one row isn't going to make it all the way through. So I folded that, and I have 3 approximately 1 inch, it can be a little bit bigger, pieces of the fusible interfacing. So I'm going to fold it over about 1.25 inches, and I'm going to press this all the way down. Okay, so you see we fold over our 1.25 inches and we pressed it all the way down. Then you're going to come on the other side. Now it's just this seam right here. So fold it over a little more than 1/4 inch, and then press that all the way down, and then we'll come back to the table. Okay, so the first fold we made was about 1.25 inches. And then this fold was a little bit over 1/4 inch. And again, our goal is to be able to take that and go all the way to the edge to make our strap. So now you take the fusible interfacing that you had and you tuck it in under the larger flap. And it's okay if it's not the same size of their strap, you know, the same width, it's okay. So you just tuck it in under there. And when you come to, like, this is not going to be long enough, right? Because it ends right here. Just pick up another piece and put it right in there. Because again, we're putting 4 seams. So your goal is to get them to match. Because we're going to stitch down this side, we're going to stitch down this edge, and then we're going to put 2 seam lines in the middle of the strap. And that will really make this a solid strap. So let me go press this, and then I'll take it to the machine. So while I was ironing, I did have a thought. Go ahead and put that interfacing with the glue side up, so that way when you iron it, it will secure this layer down here. Okay, so here's my first strap, and I'm going to take it to the machine and sew it. All right, so I have my strap here, and you see again, I have the smaller fold is even with that larger fold edge. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it in under here, and I'm going to run it as close as possible. Very much like an edge stitching to catch that. And I'm going to start on the fold side first, because what that will do is so if you start it over here, it will pull away from here and they won't line up. So at least that's what I found. So I start with my folded edges, the open edge first, and I'm going to stitch as close as possible as I can all the way to the bottom. Okay, so as I'm approaching the end, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift up my foot and I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to come down the folded edge. And I don't remember where, who, or why I was told that when you're running stitches like this, that running them in opposite direction is better for the material. So that's what I'm going to do. So I went down this side, and I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to come this, so that the stitches are running in the opposite direction. And if anybody knows why, please tell me in the comments. I just vaguely remember learning that somewhere, and I don't remember why. So that's what I do with my straps, is I do the folded edges, or the open edges first, and then I come and sew along the folded edge, again, as close as possible. And I'm going to put 2 more rows of stitches in this strap. And how I measure where they go, and again, I'm going to flip it, and I'm not going to go to the other end. I'm going to turn it right around and come back down here. So I will take the edge of my presser foot, sorry, and I will put it on that stitch, and I will stitch another row all the way down the strap. So I got a little off there. And don't worry about that. By the time you're done, and if anybody ever gets that close to see that you might have just swerved a little bit, they don't need to be looking at that close anyways. All right, so then again, I will line it up with this stitch edge, and I will just run it down there, and that will finish up this strap. And then we have one more strap to do, and then we will have all the pieces made for our bag, and we can finally start assembling it. Be done. Okay, so there you are. There is our strap with our 4 seams in it, and it's really sturdy. So let's go make the other one, and then we can assemble our bag. You should have both your straps. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put this bag together so that we can clip it and wash it, and you can carry it. So the next thing that we're going to do is for both the rag quilt side and the patchwork side, we're going to sew them together. We're so close to getting you able to carry that bag. Okay, I have the outsides of my bag here, the rag quilted side, and this is the bottom right here. So when you take and put the sides together and you look at the bottom, we have seams that we really want to match up. So unlike other tote bags, where you might start at one corner and sew all the way down and around, we're going to sew the bottom first because we're going to match these seams. Once we've sewn that, you can pick either side that you want to sew next and then just run your seam from the bottom to the top. From the bottom to the top, it doesn't matter which order that you go into. What matters is sewing that bottom one first so that you can match the seams here. So we're going to take that to the sewing machine and do that. So I changed my seam allowance to a 1/2 inch here for the bag. I'm going to match those seams. I'm going to match these seams up, and I'm going to sew across the bottom of the bag. And again, because we're boxing these corners, we can do it this way. And again, I'm starting at the bottom of the bag because I really want my seams to match. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't match if you started at the top, but this is just how I do it. And then as I come across those, I am going to back stitch just to give it a little bit more reinforcement. And I'm just going to watch my seams. And again, I'm going to back stitch. I always just like to take it slow. And this is where I said where the walking foot really comes in handy for me, because I have the fusible interfacing. I have a layer of flannel and then the cotton. Oh, forgot to put my needle down before I moved my material. So I'm just going to continue sewing across the bottom of my bag. With my 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching over the seams as I come to them. All right, so now I'm going to sew up right side of the bag again with my 1/2 inch seam allowance. Let's just sew up the right side. And then there are also seams here that I want to pay attention to as well. And again, you can work your material into that seam if they don't quite line up. Because once you rag these bags and wash them, you'll never be able to tell. Other side and sew. Here. Am I still recording? Alright, so we have sewn all the way around the bottom and both of the sides of our bag. You can see here. You can see there. So we've sewn all the way around it. We're going to do the same thing with the patchwork side. This is my bottom because here's the top of my pocket and here's the top of my pocket. So I'm going to match these seams and I'm going to sew across the bottom here and then I will sew up the sides. All right, I have matched those seams and I'm going to go ahead and put my needle down here because I'm going to just check my pockets one more time. So this is the bottom, but I'm going to just double check my pockets. Yep. Okay, so we're good. So that it will be so it will be just like the rag quilt side. So I'm going to sew across using the 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure my seams stay flat. And I'm going to back stitch across those seams. And in a similar fashion, sew both sides of your patchwork panels. And then we'll take them to the table and trim off the seam allowance. And the next thing that we'll do will be the boxed corners. Let's talk about how you box the corners. I'm going to use this little 2-inch square. But when I measure, I put my square on the seams or on the stitches. I don't measure my 2 inches from the corner. I measure it from the stitches. I'm going to mark And again, I set the square on the stitches. And then we're just going to cut this out. And we're going to do that on both sides. And again, the 2-inch ruler. And if you don't have one of these, just measure up 2 inches, measure here 2 inches, measure here 2 inches, and then just draw your lines. So you cut out both of the corners. Okay. So now if you take and pinch one side and pinch the other side and pull it together, it should form a straight line. And that's what you're going to sew. Clip that, and then we're going to take and run a seam right across that, and that will give us our box corners. Okay, so I am going to take one of my clips out, and I'm going to put it in there. So all you do is sew straight across where you have clipped. Trying really hard to use clips, but it's really hard for me to use them. So you just sew straight across. Let me get it lined back up there. And if you want to double enforce, I would double enforce it on the rag quilt side of the bag. It's not really necessary to move it here, but you could. Actually, we'll just go ahead and do that. So we ran one seam, and now let's just run another seam just to reinforce it. Now let's sew the other corner of our patchwork side. And again, you just sew straight across it. And then as I did in the other one, I'll just come back and sew another seam just to reinforce it. Okay, so that finishes up our patchwork side. So that's our patchwork side. Okay, so now for the rag quilt side, I'm going to lay my ruler again on the stitch lines. And I'm going to mark out where I'm going to cut out my corners on both sides before I cut. And then with my scissors, I will just take and cut out that square. Let me get it on the other side. This one's a little bit, because it's thicker, right? So it's just going to be a little bit more bulky. But again, you're going to match up those seams and you're going to pull it straight across. You see how I lined it up? There we go. And then I'm just going to take my clips, and I would put these seams opposite. See how they're opposite there? Not try to, if you could, I guess you could lay them out. I just always like to try to do them opposite. And I'm going to clip them. I'm going to clip again. Then I'm going to go to the other side. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pinch, and I'm going to pull and tuck under, I guess is a really good motion. And then there's how it looks from the top. And just make sure everything is straight, and then just clip. And then we are going to head to the sewing machine, and we are going to seam crossed. So your rag quilt side is thicker. Just go slow. And I kind of pull it up together so that it's not, that it's not too bulky. Just go slow. So undo one of your clips and put it under the presser foot. Oh, I can't ever get that right. And then a few stitches. I'm going to back stitch. And then just, but again, if you have your walking foot on there, let it do the work and go slow. Because when you get to these seams, they are thick. But that is what this walking foot is for. And I'm just gonna, a little bit there. And you just sew right across. And then I am going to reinforce this seam. So again, I'm just going to sew right very close to where I had it before. And just, again, just slow it down as you get over to those seams where it is a lot more bulky. So we got one side done. Now let's do the other side, and we can flip these inside out and finally see what our bag is looking like. All right, so here is the other side. I'm going to put it under the presser foot in. And again, don't try to force the material, or don't try to force the bag. Just let whatever foot you're using, whether it's a regular foot or the walking foot, just let it do its job. And then I'm just gonna sew all the way. Okay, and then I'm gonna reinforce this seam. Take it to the table and turn the bag inside out, and we will set the patchwork side into the rag quilt side. That's how you make your boxed corners. Then once we finish that, all we have left to do is to the inside and the outside and sew the straps on. Clip it, wash it, and you're ready to go. So now what you want to do is you want to flip your bag inside out and get the right side showing. Look at those seams. And then go ahead and just take your fingers or your thumb and then just poke at those corners so that they, just give that boxy look. And let's give it a shake. And look how good it's turning out. I can't wait for you guys to make one. All right, so that is the rag quilt side. Now let's do the same with our patchwork side. Let's flip it out and just use your hands to kind of, make those corners. I just want to see it because we're going to have to flip it back to the wrong side. I just wanted to see it. So there's our patchwork side. Okay, I have the bag here with our right sides out, and then you have the interfacing side here. So then you're going to take your patchwork side, and the wrong sides are going to be out, and you're just going to set it inside of your bag. So the wrong sides of each are facing each other. So you should be able to look down, see your pockets, and you should look down and see the front part of your patchwork panel. Okay, so here's where all those clips are going to come in really, really handy. So what you want to do is you want to take the side seams of your patchwork and the side seams of your bag, and you want to clip it at the top. Now remember, we're rag quilting this, so the top seam will be exposed. So unlike a traditional bag, we're not going to have to sew it around and flip it inside out. Again, that's what I love about it. So the first thing I do is I match up both of my side seams, and I'll clip them, and then I will go ahead and clip both bags together all the way around. We still have to put our strap in, but I go ahead and clip my bag first. Okay, so I'm just going to continue to clip around my bag. And again, the wrong sides are together. You should be able to look down once you have clipped it and see the inside of your patchwork should be right side looking at you. Once you get it clipped, you should see no wrong sides. And I'm hoping you guys can see that, how I'm clipping. But I just clip all the way around. Okay. So once I have attached my patchwork side to my rag quilt side, and I'm evened it out, and I'm taking a look at it, I'm making sure that everything's good here. You can lay it down and then just decide where you would like to have some additional clips. Once we clip all the seams, it will give you that rag look. So this is where it goes from. It goes from these seams to this. All right, now we need to put the straps on and sew around the top. We can clip those seams. So I'm just gonna lay it right here. So here's our straps. Remember we had them done from our first step. And then if you look at your bag, here's your middle seam. And so I like to put my straps here and here. So what I will do is I will, if I've clipped it, I will unclip it and I will slide it in between the patchwork layer and the rag quilt layer. And then I will clip it. And I'm going to go down about 2 inches. And I'm going to center it up on the seam that goes down through here. Pin my strap to the bag. And again, it is in between the patchwork layer and the rag quilt layer. So again, about 2 inches. And I'm putting it inside and in between the rag quilt layer and the patchwork layer. And then I'm going to pin it so they look really good. Okay, I'm going to flip the bag over so that I know where my straps go on the other side. Straighten my bag up. And again, this is the center seam, and I'm going to put the strap here and here. So I'm going to take my strap. I'm going to make sure my strap is not twisted. And then I will insert it in between the 2 layers, in between the patchwork layer, and I will line it up with the other strap. So that's why I lay it down flat. So then I can see where I want to put my straps, and I want to make sure that I get them even. So I will do that there, and then I will pin it, and then I'll follow it just again to make sure that it is not tangled up and that it matches. I will lay it on top of the other strap, and then it goes in between the patchwork layer and the rag quilt layer. We only have 2 more seams to sew on this project, and we can clip it and wash it. So we have it there. Now we just need to take it to the sewing machine, and we are going to do 2 seams. We are going to run a 3/4 inch seam around the top, and then that will leave us the area to rag. But then we're going to come and maybe another inch down and run another seam just so we can reinforce these straps. Hard for me because I'm just so not used to using clips. But, all right, let's start it at the side here, and I'm going to go ahead and take some of these clips off so I can get in there. And I'm going to sew I'm going to do about a 3/4 inch seam. So again, I'm going to start it right about where the bag is sewn together. And I'm just going to back stitch. And again, just go slow. The bag is bulky at this point. We've got a lot of clips on it. You want to keep it straight, so just go slow. And the first seam that we put in will catch the straps. The second seam that we put in will reinforce the straps. And again, just go slow. When you get to the straps, you can back stitch a little bit if you want to reinforce them there. Because again, we're going to be cutting that. And again, the bag is bulky, but that's okay. We just have to go slow. Okay, so now I'm approaching the first row of my stitches, and then I'm going to drop down. Okay, so there we go. All right, so then I'm going to just double check where my other straps were. So I'm going to drop down, say maybe another 1/2 inch, and I'm going to run another seam around the bag just to reinforce the bag and the straps and the stitches. Alright, so we're coming to the end of our second round of stitching on the bag, and I'm just going to do a quick, and now we are finished with all of the stitching. So let's take it over to the big table. Look how adorable this is. And then there's a look at the straps. Okay, so now what we have left to do is to clip the seams and wash it and dry it, and then it will be ready to carry. All right, so now I'm going to clip all of the seams. I'm going to clip every one of these seams, and I'm going to clip them really close together, like 1/8 of an inch, really close. And this will give a really nice rag effect. And you can see it is really close together. So I'm going to clip all the seams, and then we'll talk a little bit about what to do about washing and drying it, and then our bag will be ready. So let me just clip a couple more things here, and then I'm going to go do all the clipping and then come back here and we'll talk about how to wash and dry the bag. All right, I have clipped all of the seams on the front. Now don't forget that we have to clip this pockets on the inside. So flip your bag out and clip all around the pocket and across the top on both sides. So again, I'm going to take it now to the dryer, and I'm going to put it in for about 20 minutes with the microfiber towels. So it has spent about 20 minutes in the dryer. We use the Shout color catcher. So I'm going to throw it in the washer, and then when it's done, I'm going to take it outside. All right, here it is in its bag. We'll get it in the wash and then get it outside to shake, get it in the dryer. And here you go. Here is the Jeanette bag that we made during this video. It has been washed and dried, and look at those fuzzy seams. Oh, and let me flip it inside out so that you can see it as well. It really turned out quite pretty. I love all the colors. So again, you would just straighten out your corners here if you wanted to carry it this way. And it is, like I said, fully reversible. On the straps, if you do not want them this long, then just shorten them up for whatever length that you want. But let's take a look at the straps again. Great. So let me flip it back out. All right, now that we're all done with our bag and we're ready to go show it off, let's talk about what we've learned today. We learned basic bag making techniques like boxing corners, pockets, and straps. We learned to organize our work so that we could make efficient use of our time. And we learned that we could make this bag as unique as we are. So I would love to see your version of the Jeanette. So my contact information is in the description. If you make the bag, please let me know. I would love to see a picture of it as well. And if you like this video, go check out the video up here in the corner because it's another project that I think you would like. And with that, I am Melissa. This is Make with Melissa. I hope you have a great day and see you. Bye.